All right, hello. This is another edition of Rapid Fire, part of Cinphomaniac, and today we're going to be talking about The Matrix Resurrections. So this is the fourth film, the follow-up to the once thought dead Matrix trilogy, which was a complete story for better and for worse. I know a lot of people have issues with the sequels, Reloaded and Revolutions, and I think even people who enjoy those films for what they are, myself more or less included, still would say, okay, yes, but they're not nearly the cinematic kind of hit that the first original film is, which is impact and experience can't be can't be overstated. Nevertheless, I was really looking forward to this movie. Just out of sheer curiosity, I love the Matrix franchise. I was excited to see it come back. Even one Wachowski short, I figured that Lana Wachowski was going to deliver a interesting movie. Maybe not a great movie, but an interesting movie. And I think that's what we got. Um, I'll start out by saying, yes, this is going to be spoiler free. It's rapid fire. So I won't really get into too much details about the plot or story, but I will just say I did like the movie. I think it's worth a watch. I think it's worth a trip to a theater, though, of course, it's also available on HBO Max. The film is very interesting. Like I said, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but I think it's safe to say, if you've even seen the trailers, there's a certain sort of meta aspect to the storytelling here, sort of self-referential way, which is kind of increasingly more and more of a commonplace thing in our pop cultural experience as more and more things get rebooted, remade, relaunched, revived. There's going to be more and more of a sense of the real world weight, the real world time passing, etc., being played into these movies, and that there's a more than one approach to that, as this film demonstrates. But I will say that in general, the approach here, while certainly interesting, made me question, okay, but is this film kind of commenting on itself in such a way that is making undercutting it too much, where you're just like, right, we don't need to be doing this. And nevertheless, I think what made me mostly enjoy the film was that the ride itself, seeing how the canon established in the Matrix, particularly in the sequels, and that might rub people the wrong way, is followed up upon. How they address the questions you're probably having if you're familiar with the story of those last two films, which, even though I'm not necessarily trying to unspoil those movies, I still feel like to even address too much of what I'm talking about specifically would be spoiling this movie. But if you know, you know, right? So seeing how this film addressed that and continue to evolve the mythology, the world building of the original trilogy definitely was the highlight for me. That and just seeing Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss again in these roles is very fulfilling. I enjoyed it. It's not as fulfilling as some of the other sort of revival callback things we've gotten lately, but it's nevertheless something that I enjoyed. I think another thing I would praise the film for is its visual stylings. They did a sort of different approach than you might be familiar with previous Matrix films. Gone are the cold, stark blues and greens. I mean, they're here and there, but the film uses a lot of warm coloring and sunlight, and even the night scenes tend to have a more warm hue to them. And it's the greens and blues are still there, but they're almost like as contrast. And it fits well with some of the stuff that's introduced in the evolved mythology. But in general, I feel as though where the film is most lacking is in the action department, which is upsetting because, like, even the one thing I would say about the sequels, certainly Matrix Reloaded, is that they had great action set pieces. Maybe ones that some might argue are too long, maybe ones that haven't held up particularly well due to the CG, but there was an emphasis on that spectacle that made you feel like, oh wow, they're really going for something here. This movie, not so much. I mean, it felt like major step down, not only from those sequels, but from the original film. And that's disappointing. I don't think it had anything to do with the aging bodies of Carrie-Anne Moss or Keanu Reeves. Not in the slightest. They seem as limber and fit and ready as ever. It just seems like the film is lacking impact. Like when punches and things would hit, it just like doesn't feel like the sound design. I think related is just way off in this movie. I don't know what's up with that, but the sound design is lacking the impact that it needed. And the actual choreography, the way it's edited, the way these fights are shot, the just not even just fights. I'm not just talking the kung fu stuff. I'm talking like all the action. And for story reasons, they're doing some interesting new things here, some additional like sort of genre bending, surprisingly. But again, it doesn't quite work for me. In terms of like some of the more meta commentary stuff or some of the newer like for 2021 flavors here, I think they're again interesting, but satisfying, good, as clever as they wish they were, not so much, unfortunately. So, I mean, those are the parts I'm most mixed on. That, and also, I think the thing I'm maybe the most mixed on is the ending. Again, obviously, no spoilers, but it's like one of those things where you kind of wonder, okay, that's it. That feels pretty anticlimactic. I don't know where this journey has really ended us. Is this meant to be the beginning of a new follow up story that would be continued in other sequels, or is this just essentially like a sort of epilogue to the trilogy that takes it to a interesting, different, very different ending than the end of the third movie? It's hard to say. It's hard to say. We'll see how successful the film is. We'll see if there's discussion of a further sequel. But in any case, it was a weird note to end on. Not as satisfying as it should be. It felt like there should have been, even though this film is long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes. Felt like there needed to be another 30-minute third or fourth act. The movie has a third act, but again, anticlimactic. Feels like you needed a fourth act that was like the real climax, or where the real stakes or the real sort of conflict would have really come into focus, and it just doesn't happen. So yeah, I mean, on those notes, it sounds like I'm not giving the film a lot of favorable liking, but trust me when I say the stuff that is good. If you're a Matrix fan, and maybe not if you're just a casual moviegoer, but if you're a Matrix fan, if you are one of those people that kind of defends the sequels or even likes them, I do recommend you watch this movie. I think it'll give you interesting thoughts to chew on. Like, oh wow, this is what happened after the Matrix Revolutions. Um, so yeah, there's some interesting stuff there. And I, in general, whether it is another Matrix movie, I think Lana Wachowski's filmmaking is something I'm going to continue to watch out for in the future. But until then, and stay tuned for more Cinphomaniac, obviously coming up. I don't know if this is going to be dropping before or after our two Christmas themed episodes, but I'm recording this on Christmas Eve, hoping to get those out at some point tomorrow or at the 26th at the latest. But yeah, and look forward to more Cinphomaniac in the following year. Maybe we'll have a more in-depth spoiler conversation about the Matrix Resolution or Resurrections with myself and Dana. But until then, take care.